And the BBC has been thrown into a major new impartiality row after one of its most famous and supposedly impartial journalists went to war against Donald Trump. John Simpson has spent all his life working at the BBC, serving as World Affairs editor since 1988. But in a since-deleted tweet posted yesterday, he wrote, "The poll which shows Trump 10 points ahead of Biden in the US may well be inaccurate. That doesn't mean we in the West shouldn't be working really hard to strengthen ourselves against the possibility that Trump might win. I don't see any sign of this at present." This led Boris Johnson's former chief advisor, Dominic Cummings, to respond, "Good to see senior BBC hacks openly stating they're not impartial hacks, but campaigners. It's healthier this is out in the open rather than pretending like he did on Brexit." Now, Simpson has since posted what the BBC press office tonight called a clarification, explaining he deleted the original tweet because it was badly expressed, before doubling down on his pretty partisan point that the world is not prepared for the consequences of a second Trump presidency. So what do you think? Does this anti-Trump tweet from John Simpson prove that the BBC is biased? Dan at gbnews.com, vote in our poll at GB News on Twitter. But to debate this now, I'm joined by the legendary actor Christopher Biggins, Deputy UKIP leader Rebecca Jane, and the broadcaster Jeni Barnett. So, Rebecca Jane, I mean, this was completely outrageous. We now have someone who we've been told for decades to believe is completely impartial, actively wanting the world to campaign against Donald Trump. How on earth can we consider the BBC impartial anymore?
Well, we can't. And, you know, we might have been told for decades that they're impartial, but are they actually impartial? You know, we can go back to 1984 when MPs sued the BBC and won for being not so impartial. They are governed by Ofcom. They have a charter that set out that states that they should be impartial, but we know for facts they're not. You know, even when we look at the Brexit campaign, there was then a produced report that said that essentially there were five speakers for every one speaker speaking out about the Remain. So it's been a problem for many, many years, and absolutely we need to not be disillusioned with the fact that the BBC have been impartial since the 80s.
But Biggins, it's got worse, hasn't it? It's got worse because this is John Simpson, a bloke that we should trust, now feeling like he can openly campaign against a political figure.
I couldn't agree more. But, of course, John Simpson then made the mistake from his side of obliterating his tweet by taking it off, by saying this doesn't exist anymore. So, you know, he knows he's wrong.
That's true, actually. That's true, Jeni Barnett. He's admitted to bias, hasn't he?
Well, I think we're in unprecedented times. I think someone like John Simpson, who talks about Donald Trump, it's not talking about, you know, Mr. Bloggs at the end of the road. We're talking about a geezer who's being impeached. We're talking about a guy who's 10 points ahead in the poll.
No. He's been impeached, Jenny. Actually, it's Biden who should be impeached at the moment, and the BBC aren't campaigning against him, are they? They're not campaigning against a bloke, Jenny, who is clearly senile and is currently in charge of the free world. You don't hear a peep about that from the BBC. You don't hear a peep about that from the BBC.
Yeah, we do. We know he's behind in the polls. But I think in a situation like this, where the young people and several people need to look to see the direction of what's happening under Western democracy, somebody like John Simpson speaking out helps everybody. And if you can remember Pastor Martin Niemöller, who said, when they came for the communists, when they came for the trade unions, when they came from the Jews, nobody spoke out. When they came for him, there was nobody there to speak out.
But Rebecca Jane, that is not the job of the BBC. I have listened.
I think that John Simpson is very brave for what he's done.
Well, Rebecca, if he's brave enough, why doesn't he take a hike? Jenny, let me bring Rebecca Jane in. Okay. Rebecca, if he's truly brave, why doesn't he take a hike, stop taking our money, and he can go and do the job and campaign as much against Trump as he wants? He just shouldn't do it within the BBC.
Absolutely. You know, where on earth do we go with this? It's absolutely, it's nonsensical for me. You know, we have to be completely impartial. They're just not. And actually, are we trying to say that they are? Sorry, I forget the lady's name.
Jenny, yeah.
Sorry.
Jeni Barnett. Am I saying that? I'm saying that when the news is read, it's read flatly. There are no inflections. In a situation like this, where an old, you say, hack says something like this, it's because the situation is more serious than normal, and it is unprecedented.
Biggins, okay, let me just bring Biggins back in, because the problem I've got, Biggins, is that actually there's no one at the BBC who seems to support Brexit or support Trump. They all think in one particular way, and we've seen the folk who do leave the BBC, like Emily Maitlis and John Sopel and Lewis Goodall, prove that they are actually not just on the left, Biggins, they're on the hard left.
Absolutely. And this isn't what the BBC is about at all. We are paying the BBC to be impartial, and there they are, left-wing as any left-wing can be.
But the left wing would accuse the BBC of being right.
Oh, please.
Jenny, you didn't answer my question,
come on,
though.
Jenny.
Jenny, please can you answer my question? Do you believe that the BBC are impartial?
Yeah, because I have been told off several times at the BBC for not being impartial.
Right, OK. So let me just give you some facts then, if you don't mind. So, obviously, in the 1980s, their Falkland War coverage was brought into question. As I said, 1984, they were sued and won by MPs for not being impartial. Like I said about the Brexit thing, 5-1 in favour of Remain. 2019, they were accused of Labour bias. And in 2020, MPs boycotted their Radio 4 programme.
Rebecca,
how is that
where are you going?
How is that impartial?
Where are you going with this?
Sorry?
I am saying that however you look at the BBC, we are faced with the greatest nation on earth and a fascist who has been impeached standing for president.
Yeah, so you don't like him, Jenny, you don't like him, and so the BBC should campaign against him. That's what you think. Jeni Barnett, Rebecca Jane, Biggins, love having you three. Always will speak very soon, but who do you agree with on this? Does John Simpson's anti-Trump tweet prove that BBC News is biased? From Dell, I think the BBC should just admit they don't have standards when it comes to bias. Another star shares political views, yet no action is ever taken. From 2P, the BBC is incredibly biased. From Gary Lineker to Nish Kumar, their roster is filled with left-wing anti-conservative stars who are not afraid to vocalise their views. And Evie via Twitter writes, to be fair, we've always known John Simpson holds some unusual views. Your verdict now in. 91% of you agree with me that Simpson's tweet proves BBC is biased, the BBC News is biased. Well, just 9% of you say it doesn't.